Okay, our next assignment, assignment 4, is to start making our own pixels, or at least pretend that we are painting ourselves. And I call this the Cloud Creature Project, because here in Texas we have big skies, especially in the summer. And we have these big, strong clouds that you can often pretend that you see a creature in them. Right? So the idea is to take your creature design and make as believable a cloud as you can that's inspired by your creature design. And I've gotten better and better at this with practice, but it really depends on what kind of clouds you're going for and what kind of textures you're trying to imitate. So this is my preferred way to turn it in now. Just make one image that's complete and then just tuck your little cutout of your character in the corner so we know the one that you're trying to mimic. So notice with this creature, which was a really bumpy, very, very high contrast, sharp-edged creature design, I'm using like cumulus clouds from quite a distance that look a lot more bumpy and have a lot more edges to them. Then for this, which is more kind of soft and airy, and this bird design, I used lower atmosphere clouds that are a little bit more broken up and have softer edges. The reason we do a cloud creature is to really pay attention to edges, which is something that's hard to learn. But it's a skill that's going to help us with all of our raster work coming forward. So what's amazing about clouds, and start looking at them, as you commute home tonight, the edges change. You can have very hard edge, kind of highly contrasted highlights in clouds, some very deep shadows, but you can also have edges that just disappear into nothing. Right? It depends on the color of the sky behind. It depends on the density of vapor in the air. And we're going to try to mimic that. Right? I do not need you to capture specific details. I have an ear and an eye in there, and I separate out the head from the rest. But I do want it to suggest your creature. So if your creature has a really clean silhouette, so if you think of this creature without the kind of frilly antlers, that's a pretty clean silhouette. But with the frilly antlers, it just becomes a big blob, right? So you might have to be creative about how you use dodge and burn, about how you paint in certain elements in order to get that illusion. Also notice that the silhouette of these legs, these 4 legs coming underneath the torso, wouldn't make a lot of sense in a cloud, right? You don't have vertical columns of cloud, but you can suggest them by breaking up cloud form and letting the viewer almost kind of connect the dots. So this becomes a design problem too. So this was the very first demo I did of this, and you'll see that right away this cloud feels too cut out, right? Too sharp edged. But this is exactly how you have to start it. So we're going to learn how to do kind of a cookie cutter of our creature to start with, and then we'll learn how to soften it up. And this one's a little too soft overall. So it's a mixture of in between to get kind of the right balance. So how do we do it? We go to assignment 2, and our best cleaned up version now. Maybe it's the PNG that you're going to resubmit. And you're going to open up not the PSD, but the best cleaned PNG you have in Photoshop. So you open up your PNG in Photoshop. And you're going to check to make sure it's the right resolution, but there's no reason it shouldn't be. It should be a clean, kind of cut out, no debris. So if I go to image size, yes, mine is huge, 17 by 16 inches by 350 pixels per inch. Plenty big. The next step is you're going to find cloud reference. Because even though this is our introduction to digital painting and using the pixels in our own way, we are still going to reference from existing pixels. So if I just look up cloud in images in Google, and then I want search tools, I want the size to be, let's do at least 8 megapixels again. you'll see a lot of variations in clouds. Some that are all on their own, some that are big collective masses with a lot of heavy edges. And I'll use a lot of these different clouds each semester. Sometimes I've shot my own cloud reference, right? And then we're basically using it to do this kind of thing, to understand clouds enough as a texture to be able to make our own image out of them. And we're not trying to do it with perfection, because it can get very frustrating very quickly. So I found a lot of clouds. Now the things I'm looking for are consistent lighting. So lighting that's from above, shadows underneath. When you get like backlit clouds, they can be really interesting. But if you try to match that with your creature, you're going to have trouble like understanding it. But you take that backlit cloud and these backlit clouds, and if you can find enough reference, you might be able to piece it together. And it depends on what your creature design is, how dramatic it is. You're allowed to put other clouds around your creature if you want. And I'm going to start a folder. I need to clean up my desktop after this, but I'm going to start a folder of cloud reference that I think is large enough, at least 8 megapixels, and with consistent enough lighting. But I also want to check the quality of each photo. That looks pretty good. And then the part that we're actually going to be fully digitally painting is we're going to create our own sky behind it. We'll just do a gradation fill, and for the first time completely introduce our own pixels. Now, all of you want to find one big cloud. And that's what we're going to use today to set up the project. And it depends how bright you want it. I could use this one. I could use one of the earlier ones. But we're basically going to treat the cloud like it's dough. And we're going to roll it out. And then we're going to use our creature as a cookie cutter. And we're going to cut our creature shape out of that rolled out cloud. And it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But hopefully it will once I show you. Okay, so I've got 4 or 5 good cloud references. I'm going to find the one that's kind of the biggest lump of cloud. And I like to use a single lump. So I think this one, and hey, it's called Perfect Cloud. Very nice. I drag it in, and then I immediately stretch it out, roll it out on all edges, like I'm rolling out dough. And I will keep it as a smart layer for now. Hit return. And then take its opacity down just so I can see my creature. And it's just like cutting out Christmas cookies. I want to make sure I have enough dough to fit the whole design. Now, the thing you do have to be careful about with clouds is I can't just freely rotate it or flip it because the lighting has to make sense. A cloud with a shadow on the top and light on the bottom doesn't make any sense, right? That's a smoke signal, not a cloud. So you do have to be careful of the direction of the lighting. Okay, once you have your placement, I can take it back to 100%. It's still a smart layer. I go to my creature layer, and I use my magic wand. I'm going to have contiguous unchecked, so I get all these little undercuts. And I'm going to select the empty space around my creature. Nice and sharp, and it's cut out. So you see that? Now, because clouds are never perfectly sharp, I'm going to refine my edge. So click Refine Edge, and we're going to feather it and expand it. And it'll show me a nice preview here. So I'm going to shift my edge even a little bit more, maybe about 30%. I'm going to feather it maybe 4 or 5 pixels. make the radius 3 or 4 pixels. And maybe smooth it just a little bit to kind of take the edge off of some of these sharp peaks on my design. And I always set it to remember settings. And so that's going to bite away from my selection a little bit because I'm selecting, remember, the outside space around my creature. But it's also going to round out wherever there's really sharp direction changes. That's what smooth does. And we'll make it more kind of soft and flowing. Not that all clouds are smooth, but this is a nice way to get started. Okay, so now I have that selection. Now I'm going to move that selection and select this layer. And you'll see the little marching ants showing my cookie cutter design. And then I'm going to say select inverse, so that I'm selecting inside the space instead of outside the space. And then I hit Command J to duplicate. And that will give me a nice little cutout of cloud to work with. Okay, now I make a new layer above that. And I am going to, for the first time, paint something. So I'm going to go to where the paint bucket is. And I'm going to use the gradient tool. Go up to the gradient options, pick the first box, double click on it, and we can select our colors. So double click on that little box, and I'm going to pick a light blue. Double click on this box, and I would just do a gradation between 2 to start. And I'll pick a fairly desaturated darker blue. And if I want, I can actually pick it from my cloud reference. So the dark blue right there, maybe. All right. Now I say OK. And I'm going to paint a linear gradation, normal at 100% opacity, across a new layer from top to bottom. Like that. And now I'm going to put that underneath my cloud. Okay? And if you don't like the angle that you did it, you can do top to bottom, a slightly different angle. I don't like to do it straight down. That looks too machined. So I do it at a slight angle usually. Something like that. Now I'm ready to bring in some other cloud reference. Things on top. And just like this is practicing our skills, just like we did for our landscape and for our creature design, I'll use my lasso. I'll do a rough selection around the parts of the cloud I think might be useful, duplicate them from the smart layer, turn off the smart layer, and I'll just turn that off for the moment and bring in the next. So just keep my cloud reference open off to the side so I can easily bring it in. And when I select my clouds, I definitely want to get the edges of them. It's easy to select out the blue. But these edges are going to be what's really useful, because it would take a lot of time to paint those. So if I can use them, I'm in better shape. And it almost doesn't matter what your reference is, as long as the light logic all makes sense. They're not lit from different angles. Got a lot of clouds here I could use. Again, it's those edges that are going to be useful. Clouds make really bizarre shapes. And you might rely on all of these. This one is a little bit yellow, so color balance will help with that. Try not to stretch them too much, but you can, because they're organic, you can stretch them a little bit without any problem.